Wonderful day, wonderful people. Hopefully everybody is super great and getting better. Welcome to the channel, the Corey Webster Experience. I am your host, Corey Webster. I am C Web on all social media platforms, and we right back to you with another episode. I know, the past episode was kind of heavy, but today, I think it's going to be a while. It's going to be an adjustment for individuals getting back that was kind of hit hard by that the news about Kyren Lacy. And I would say, why did that news hit hard to me? And you see today I'm repping my Tigers. And I remember when other athletes had issues with, things that happened in college, I used to always be, man, it's not the three letters. And I just came up with that just in conversation. And I'd be like, so that's for all universities. I'm like, it's not the university in itself. It's individuals that's on these universities that may be not doing the right thing or not doing right by the individuals that we should hold accountable to them. You know what I mean? Or hold them accountable to their actions. So when I say that, I had some individuals, and I see those individuals circle back and kind of put themselves in, some of them, not all. Some either, disassociate themselves with the university. And I saw some of them, they had spoken away and disassociated themselves in a way, but then when opportunities presented themselves, was put in a position to, I guess, kind of latch on, and they went on ahead and, climb back on the bandwagon or whatever you want to say, you know what I mean? But I used to always tell them, man, look, it's not the three letters mean LSU that's doing you something. It's not because you're a part of building this university or building this space into what it is. Doesn't matter how big or small your name is, what I mean? Some people may want to have more credit into making it, a worldwide name, but everybody has something into it. And, at one point I remember it was a thing that was said around universities where if a university is going to use you, you make sure that you use the university to get everything out of it. And at the time, those things were, just get education. Those things was like, take full advantage of the opportunity in networking and, growing and nurturing the talents or the skills academically, athletically, if you was a student athlete, just taking advantage of all of those things that the university had to offer. And now, especially with student athletes, that whole dynamic has shifted and changed as far as NIL, as far as transfer portal and things of that nature, and how the alumni and everybody can associate with the student athletes and things like that. So that has changed. And, it's always ongoing and always evolving, and that's a good thing. But I think just as much as the athletes and the student athletes and their families are evolving and changing, I think it's noted to say that the university has to do the same thing in order to accommodate these changes and accommodate their students and student athletes, because there's some programs out there that I've been a part of that we shine some light on that was doing some major things on the university. And at one time I thought the student athletes were dropping out and had hard time just because of the workload that they had asked them to do, along with being a full-time student. If you're a full-time student at a university, normally jobs don't allow you to work a full-time schedule. But the student athletes, and I'm not trying to compare, I'm just, speaking on the facts. The time that the student athletes put in is basically a full-time job. And I'm guessing that's why NIL and even the whole notion of, treating them as working class or professionals is a conversation now because of the time and the hours that they put in. So, but what I found out was it was the regular student that wasn't, just a student that was having a hard time. You know what I mean? Because student athletes, they have some type of accountability partner. They have some type of group that is governing over them, that's making sure that they're, going to study hall. They have study hall, Other students don't have the opportunity to go to study hall or have things like that in place. So I found out that it was a lot at a PWI school. It was a lot of the African-American students that male students that was dropping out at an alarming rate. And I found that strange. I'm like, wow. So it's not the student athletes that's having the hardest? Like, no, indeed not. It's the, African Americans, males that's having the hardest time because of the adjustment, especially at the PWI, being around, everybody don't come from the same culture, same background. So these guys, they're in maybe unfamiliar territory socially, so they don't have a place to have an outlet. They also, maybe around teachers that don't look like them, and that's another strain on the relationship of how to, go about being a better them. And a lot of that is overwhelming. And a lot of those students was dropping out at an alarming rate. And we was able, my foundation at the time, along with I had help from Latangela Faye, Marcus Randall, Angie Flannery. Flannery, my fault, Angie. And, we worked with BMLI, and I don't even know if that program is still going, but at the time, BMLI was Black Male Leader Initiative. And those guys were graduating 100% of everybody that was involved in that club. And what we did was we just partnered with them with my Suited for Success mentorship program. And even in that whole program, when you start doing things, this was a program that was already there, was doing well. We just wanted to recognize them and started working with them to bring, just some awareness to what they were doing. And we got the president of the campus at the time. I'm not going to call his name, but we got him involved. And he didn't even know what was going on campus, just because of our partnership with it. But anyway, then we had a whole nother thing that went into that. But I was just saying that to say those guys had felt the need of having somebody in place to check their grades, that, had people there to tutor each other and things like that. And for the student athletes, this stuff come with the academic centers and things of that nature. So with that being said, we have to hold these universities accountable for the things that they say they're going to do when they're in our homes recruiting us. And not only get it done for the student athletes, but make sure that, being inclusive, that, they have other programs that's getting it done for everybody on campus. And that's whoever's going through some minor, doesn't matter the color of those individuals, if a guy gets, or a female gets, into your school, we should want to see them succeed and do their very best on campus. So the matter of Kyron Lacy hitting home to me, he's from right down, the Highway 20, where I'm from, Vacherie, associated with Thibodaux, proximity of place, that's about 20 minutes maybe. But also he's a student athlete. And also I had conversations with individuals about this very matter, because I grew up in a time where we didn't have social media. So I know what it is to live a life without social media, without the internet, and me trying to explain that to some officials and some people that was in place to make change. And I felt like it fell on deaf ears. And for me, that was one of the signs that I was like, I don't think they fully are invested in seeing the student athletes become what they can become. They're just in it to see how can they benefit from being around these student athletes, or how they can push the university forward from using student athletes. And this is my honest opinion from having these meetings. Like, I had the conversation, a tough conversation, about if things weren't put in place, then situations like what we just saw with Kyron Lacy was going to happen. I had those tough conversations just because, man, at this point right now, I know about 4 to 6 people that unalive themselves. And, growing up, that just wasn't something that was a part of any culture that I was ever a part of. So now, knowing individuals that have went through that, I wanted to make sure it didn't fall, in vain. So, man, over 15 years ago, and we could get in more in depth maybe at a later moment. 15 years ago, I had this conversation. And that's when I decided that, I was going to do the things that I'm doing now, build programs and write programs and do underwrites and things of that nature so I can, help the students, student athletes transition from, different phases in their life that they go through. And this is one of the initiatives, having a platform like this to be able to speak and get our stories out. The true stories, the real stories, not from third person, not from somebody that's just an eyewitness, but actual guys that have been through that, actual young ladies that have been through it, and, allow these individuals to learn from what we have been through and not have somebody there that's filtering it to their advantage and to control the narrative. So again, why this hit home for me is just because I had these conversations, because I don't want to say I had a vision, because I do, but I don't want to say that I saw this happening, but I did, And it was tough to see. And I just wanted to, share light on them, because everybody may not be as strong as the next person. But if we have a village, a community in place, then we can help each other and they can lean on each other to be strong. So I'll say this, I did see that Duke had, and this over 15 plus years ago, Duke has a program that's like the Brotherhood. And that's what the name of the program is, where these guys can lean on former individuals that came before them, that may have, gone through or that have went through some of the things that they are currently going through now, or things that we can prevent the current student or student athlete from going through, or just help them navigate it a little seamlessly, because it's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. But if you know somebody else that's been there, done it, you are more inclined to listen to that individual story, especially if they have made it on the other side or had a breakthrough. And that's what I thought it was. And when I see a lot of universities or organizations, what they do, somebody can have a great idea and understand how to work that idea. What they would do is either try to steal that idea and do it on their own so they can control the narrative, and they can maybe sometimes just, hey, we have this, but they're not really doing what that program needs to be doing in order to better serve the students or student athletes. They only just put it in place as a recruiting tool to say, hey, we have this there. So if your kid needs it, it's there for them. It's almost like, we say cover your own butt. They have it there for a space to cover your own butt. And I don't think that's cool, because they have individuals that already have these programs in place, and you have an opportunity to partner with them or work with them because they're doing great work, then do that. Some things you can't just replicate just from watching it. If you don't understand the nuances that goes into being what it takes to be what those individual kids are trying to get to. And I don't care what degree, what level of degrees that you have, you can't teach, firsthand experience from these type of events. So that's why it's so close to home to me. And that's why we're going to continue to talk about it. And I'm happy that there's so many different platforms out there, that not one platform, just because their mic may be larger, can, control the narrative. Individuals can speak and tell true stories. There's a lot of stories out there that I think needs to be heard. You mentioned earlier that, man, I think those kids need to hear these stories. And because we talk about things being hereditary, and I think things are sometimes hereditary, but it's also because of the habits, right? That's a part of the hereditary, right? Because so-and-so did this. What is my father that came before me, my grandfather, they did this, and they passed some of the habits down. So now whatever the habit was that they passed down, that becomes hereditary to my family, because I continue to pass the habit down. I think sometimes when we think of, breaking generational curses, we only think of the bad things. And when I say bad things, things that, doesn't feel good to you. But it's also something that may feel good to you, that candy versus medicine, soul food. You remember the movie Soul Food? For me, when I see Soul Food, after going through some of the things that I went through as far as having breakthroughs, I see the very thing that Big Mama died from is how we celebrated Big Mama going away. Big Mama had high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes and all these things. And we brought the family together off of the same food that probably helped kill Big Mama. So I think when we talk about being hereditary, that's what I see, some things being hereditary. So, just be cognizant of, be aware of, some of the things that we're doing, but also not just the university, the letters, because that's just buildings and a name and a branding and marketing behind it. Those individuals that may have done us wrong, it's time to hold those individuals accountable and, tell your story. So I ain't gonna hold it. I know you want to talk about NBA because there's a lot of NBA going on right now. The playoff can we say the playoff has started? I know we got a play-in game. They got a play-in game, a play-in tournament now. Warriors just beat the Grizzlies. So they're going to be facing Houston Rockets, number 2 in the West, as well as, you told me, God, I forget, Orlando beat Atlanta, and they're going to be facing Boston Celtics. So Orlando versus Boston Celtics is that the first round of the playoff, because the play-in tournament is not over yet. We still have 2 games tonight. But let's get into it. I know you said you were so jived up about these questions that you have, like you was gonna, stomp me with these questions, but I'm ready.
One question.
One.
Just for the listeners out there who have no idea what these playoffs mean. Explain playoffs, because playoffs is new. Why do they have playoffs now? A play-in?
Play-in. The play-in tournament is new.
Sorry,
Yeah, I was going to say, you just confused them listeners.
Yes, I did. Not playoffs, but what is the purpose of the play-in?
I guess it's just another way of making it interesting, you know what I mean? Because it's, in all actuality, 8 teams that have the opportunity to play in. And they can get that number 7 and number 8 seed instead of just taking what they've done in the regular season and holding them to that. They put these 8 teams, 4 from each side, 4 from the west, 4 from the east. They let them play against each other, and then they play the number 2 and the number 1 seed. So just make it a little more interesting, you know what I mean?
So when you lose play-in, you're out of the playoffs?
Like the boys from the crew from TNT. I don't want to, you're going fishing. Okay. You are going fishing. Your season is over.
So why did they start play-in?
I can't answer that question. Why did they start it? I'll be lying to you. You know what I mean? It wasn't there when I was watching it back in the 95 and things like that. You know what I mean? But I just think they, just the same reason why we went from, in college, 4-game playoff to 8-game playoff to 12-game playoff, just to make it a little more interesting. You know what I mean? Like I said, you're going to always have 8 teams that's close to that 7, 8, 9, 10 seed. So instead of just letting them fall in a place like that, they make them play for those last 2 places in the playoff seeding.
Gotcha. Okay. I guess.
So Jimmy Butler went ham last night. We used to call him playoff Jimmy. Now he's play-in Jimmy. But now that he's in the playoff, hopefully that can continue and he can go back to being playoff Jimmy. Gotcha. Buckets.
Okay. Yes. So who was the most disappointing team this regular season?
Western Conference or Eastern Conference?
Give me both.
Western Conference, I would have to say, it can be a couple of them, but I would say the most disappointing would have to be the Phoenix Suns. Having Devin Booker, who has been around there through the ups, downs, the whole roller coaster ride, and then getting a KD, also getting a Bradley Beal, who's a 25-5 guy, and them guys not even making the playoff. I would think that has to be the most disappointing from the Western side. It didn't the whole talk about they wanted to trade Bradley Beal, but he had the trade clause in there, so he didn't want to get traded. And then Phoenix, front office kind of went behind the back and try to shift things around so they can shop KD around, and he has the no trade clause. I think all that was interesting, but I think they had to be the most disappointing team in the West. And I also say this, I remember when the Suns, not too long ago, with the team that they went to the Western Conference Final with, and looked like there was one piece away from an injury with Chris Paul at the time, and then firing the coach, and then getting a new coach, and then it's about 5 years ago. 5-6 years ago, them not being in the playoffs now, I think that'd have to be the most disappointing in the West. And then in the East, I would have to say the 76ers. A lot of changes have been made in Philadelphia, but I would say them paying Joel Embiid, them paying Tyrese Maxey, them making the move to go get a playoff Paul George. And I think it's safe to say now playoff Paul George is not a thing, because I don't even know playoff P playing in the playoffs, right? So making a move to get Paul George and then Ben Simmons coming back to play, I would have to say those two are the most disappointed teams. They're not in the playoff either. All that money in spent. And we said this early this year. No, we said this before the Olympics. Like, no disrespect to the gold medal that Joel Embiid won, but we saw he wasn't healthy then. So he's like, why not take the time to go get healthy? And that came with the controversy of him playing for the different teams in the Olympics, right? He had a couple of teams that he could have played for, but I thought he needed to go get healthy then. And, whether he needed surgery, whether he needed rehab. And to me, he felt that being a part of the USA team, and I think the USA got investigated for tampering with him because he had initially committed to another team, another country to play for. So anyway, with all that being said, with all that going on, he out for the year. Then Paul George going out for the year. Paul George also saying that he got to stop podcasting to focus on basketball, right? He had to recommit to basketball, which is his first love, which would help the podcast do well, right? To focus on basketball, just that in itself was a whole, what do they call it? Assault show. That's what I call it. I won't use profanity. Assault show. So I think those two have to be the two disappointing teams.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So who could be this year's breakout playoff performer? How about that?
Playoff performer, it's always going to be somebody, you know what I mean? And, I think Boston have an opportunity because they have a lot of depth. And I saw two guys early this season, Pitchard and, I can't think of the guy's name now, White. Those guys, when their two stars was out, went off for 40 points apiece. So I think those guys are, still hungry. And I think they want to do something special as far as going back to back, as far as defending their title. I think they still have an edge, and somebody's going to have to knock them out. And I think they have the depth that these individuals can step up and make themselves household names. So I would think one of those guys right there can step up and be a household name when it comes to the playoffs. But they also have some young guys that's in there that's, playing that maybe can do some of the same thing. But I think from a championship level, somebody going to have to knock those guys off. And that's the Boston Celtics with those two. They play their role well when they're in there. But if asked and if need to be, they can step up and be guys that can really deliver.
Gotcha. Now, what finals matchup will be the most entertaining?
Entertaining? Wow. Finals matchup. We just starting the playoff. I would say that maybe people don't want to see this, but I would say OKC from the West, being that it's a small niche town market, and maybe you say interesting, right? And maybe a Cleveland Cavaliers from the East. Why? Because these are two small markets that maybe a lot of people don't want to see when it comes to worldly, well-known, recognized franchises. It's like the Boston Celtics, the Lakers, you know what I mean? And other teams are, beginning to work their way in the right. But Cleveland haven't had a championship since LeBron. You know, OKC, this would be their first. They're both young teams that fans don't follow as much. So, you know, I think it'd be interesting to see if those two both make it there, that the fans will have to sit down and watch these finals and see what happens. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's my final pick, but I think that would be the most interesting matchup if that happened. And they both have been, you know, at the top of the NBA the whole season. You know what I mean? OKC being the number one team, right? Cleveland being number two team in the whole NBA as far as their win-loss percentage right now. So that's what I think.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for that. And that was probably the last question for the NBA side of it. Anything else?
I think one of the most interesting team or surprises will be the LA Clippers. Because, you know, we didn't get to see the LA Clippers throughout the year. You know, they had a trade, you know, their son. That was involving a couple of trades, you know what I mean? Because, you know, at one time, SGA was over there. So, they got rid of SGA to get Paul George. That didn't look like to be the move. But they got Tyronn Lue over there, and they still have Kawhi Leonard and James Harden looking like the old James Harden. So I think, and they got Zubac over there that's playing a big man role like no other. So I really think that they can make some noise in the Western Conference. So I think they could be like a Cinderella, if that's a thing in the NBA. It could be, you know, a team that shake up some things, you know what I mean? So, you know, that'll be interesting to see what they do and how they go about finishing in the Western Conference. But I ain't gonna hold you. I know you was, you know, trying to move on and talk some NFL, some whole combine things, and you know, we're a couple of weeks away from the draft. The draft is April 24th. This year's being held where? Green Bay, Lambeau Field. Come on, you know something about Lambeau Field? If you don't, I do. Frozen Tundra, I think it's called. Yep. Yeah, I got a thing or two. Maybe a highlight also, you know. But anyway, that's where the draft will be held, 2025. You know, it's just a lot that goes on to the draft, you know what I mean? It's very unpredictable. You know, they can have all these mock drafts, but, you know, I always say these mock draft individuals that's supposed to be experts, they're the only individuals other than meteorologists that can be dead wrong about everything that they say, but keep a job. So what you got? I know you got something interesting.
All right, I got a couple of questions. From a fan's perspective, how do teams determine which prospects to invite for pre-draft visits?
Well, based off of the individual needs, you know, based off of, you know, what players may be at a certain year on their contract, right? Because it's chess and checkers, right? NFL has a hard salary cap. So based off of who's signed for long term and who's under current contract throughout the year, well, then that's who we're going to be inviting in, because we ultimately want to, you know, put the best talent together, but we also have to put the best talent together with the money being structured right. So we have a guy that's been there for 10 plus years and he may be on, you know, the latter side of playing. Well, we need to have individuals that can, you know, replace him, so to speak, and be able to help us out that may be cheaper because his salary cap or his salary number may hit us a little hard. Pause, right? On our salary cap and, you know, being hard, if you understand what I'm saying. Meaning NFL has a hard salary cap. So if you got $300 million to spend, you have to spend that $300 million. You cannot go over it. Whereas in some league, you have a soft cap. You can go over it and pay the luxury tax and still continue to sign those individual players that can help you win a championship. NFL is not like that. You have to really strategic. So a general manager job and scout job is to find the best talent who we need, right? And to make a decision based off of how far along the line this guy's been in his office with us, based off of what we think his potential can be with us. How long can he play at that high level? Do we have somebody that's currently on our roster that can fulfill his need to where he's at a cheaper price, but we can go get other individuals that help us win. So there's a lot that goes into that. But based off of our needs, our salary cap, and who can best serve our team, that's how these, front office people are working.
From a player's perspective, how do players mentally prepare for the uncertainty of draft night?
A lot of what we do is, just uncertain. You know what I mean? You can go out and prepare, but that doesn't mean that, things are going to go the way you have prepared for them to go. So, a lot of times it's about being able to adjust and midstream adjust on the fly. That's why audibles is such a big thing. And, a lot of the coaches that make adjustments at halftime are some of the better coaches. But just being able to come back with certain individuals have going on. That's why we talk about great coaches. So anyway, you preparing to be your very best, and you always can control what you can't control. You can't control who draft you, but you can control being ready, being prepared. At the end of the day, you will be playing football. So, it's never, over preparing. You can always be overly prepared because you never know what teams are going to throw at you. What I'm saying about that, right? If you over prepare, know your weaknesses, know your strength, and continue to make your strengths better, but also to turn your weaknesses into strengths. So if a team asks you to do something that you're not familiar with doing, at least you have been working on this and making this a strength of yours because you recognize your weakness, and you can go there and fulfill that need for that team as well if they ask you to do something that you're not, used to doing. But it's going to have uncertainties in life, just because it's an NFL job that you're going for, they always say the more you can do, the better. So always have an open mind and always embrace, being uncomfortable, because when you embrace being uncomfortable, that's when true transformation happens, and you could be a better version of yourself, and you could tap into potential that you didn't even know you had.
Gotcha. Nice. Thank you for that information. Now, from an NFL's team's perspective, how do teams balance immediate need versus long-term potential when drafting?
Yeah, that's tricky. Because at the end of the day, you're being drafted for potential, right? So no one knows, the potential of these individual players. We have seen players that use injuries, for example. I was a big fan of Jay Williams, right? And, we thought Jay Williams was going to have a outstanding career, but a motorcycle accident kind of derailed that. You know what I'm saying? So you're getting, and it was others that I could talk about. Shout out to Chad Jones. Chad Jones was, an excellent athlete. One of the two athletes that won, if I'm not mistaken, a national championship for football at LSU and a national championship for baseball at LSU. Is another athlete out there. I'll let y'all get in the comments and let me know who that athlete is. I know him. I saw him doing some great work the other day. Shout out to him. But y'all get in the comments and let me know who that athlete is. So, and we know that, Chad had got into an accident. I think it was involving a railroad, if I'm not mistaken. And, the injuries from that was severe. So ultimately you're getting drafted off of potential. So off of what you did in the past, off of what you did in college. And we hope that as a team, as an organization, that you could nurture that talent and become something greater and something better than what we had right here. And we hope that we can help you evolve into that and develop into that, right? So at the end of the day, no one knows. Only person that knows is God. So, with him, like I said, all things is possible. But I think the fans and, everybody should understand that you're getting drafted off potential. So what you did in college doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to translate into the professional. You still have to, like I always say, plant your flag at the top when you working from the bottom in college. And then once you get to the top in college, you take that flag, you plant it at the bottom again, and you start working your way to the top in the NFL. And I think if you approach it with that mindset and be humble in that, that's when the true potential is endless to any athlete, coach, or whoever's involved in, that type of playing field or that type of work.
Nice. Thank you so much for that information. Very clear.
Yeah. So now, it's going to be interesting, to see who get drafted, where they land at, what teams do what, because so many people have so much expectation for their team because they are very prideful, and we love that because that what makes, especially the football game, that's what make it what it is and how special it is. So shout out to all of the prospects that's preparing for the draft. Keep your nose clean, keep your head down, continue working through the draft. And right now you should be fine tuning the little details on what team that you may go to. And for the fans, be patient and be excited about, who your team is going to draft and, who may end up in your team's uniform, so you can, be a fan of that individual and you want to see him go and do great things. And again, turn on the notification bell, like, subscribe, get in the comments about who your favorite team is, who your favorite player is, where you want them to go. Also, put your predictions about the whole NBA playoff series. If you know what the play-in tournament and how it came about, let us know, because we are confused up here. We have no idea. But I appreciate you guys as always. Have a great week. Stay blessed and stay safe.